Hey guys, welcome to this week's review of Mare of Easttown. So this is episode 6 and it is called Saw Must Be the Storm. So just warnings because I'll be going into full spoilers from the start. And another really strong episode, really great stuff again. And I think in terms of like just building up to like the big reveals of the case and the mystery in this show, they've timed it really to perfection. I don't think the pacing of the case coming to the crunch could be any better. This episode ends with a really nice cliffhanger that sets it up perfectly for next week's finale. I'm pretty sure next week is the final episode. It certainly would make sense, but we actually do get to the bottom of things in this one and who the actual killer is, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But the other big stuff in this episode is some of the personal stuff with Mare and her emotionally still coming to terms with her son's suicide. That is a big thing in this episode, and the drama of it and how it has impacted on her family. So that's definitely worth talking about because there's some great drama that comes out of that in this episode, and it's a very hard hitting episode. As funny as certain moments have been in this show, I think there's definitely a real dark side to it that really hits home, and some very sensitive issues. And the writing, I think, has been so good, and the performances that they've handled this stuff well. Just to say, actually, at the start of this episode, Mare's obviously in hospital. She later gets out and is released back home. Colin is sadly dead after last week's end of the episode, so sorry, Colin fans. That any sort of small chance of him pulling through is not to be, but he does get the dramatic sort of ending and the big send off with what happened with him and Mare. So that's sort of Colin done for the drama. And one thing I did notice is that actually Mare, I think, does sort of become like almost like a local hero again, or it. I think this episode sort of reinforces how important she is to the town and what she means, because at one point, one of the characters, I forget which one, actually apologizes to her for how he's like treated her and stuff, and he actually commends her, saying it's a really brave thing what you did going into the house and getting those girls, saving those girls. And I think it just reinforces that, and we get a bit of a media frenzy in the town surrounding Mare and you know what happened and stuff and the case. And obviously Ellie's home now, which is nice to see for Dawn. But Mare's put back on the case. They've got evidence now that the two cases are separate and that the guy who kidnapped the girls is not the same guy who killed Erin. And the chief reveals to Mare that you're back on the case. I relieved the other guy of his duties, and we need you, sort of thing. So she's officially back on the case, which is probably a good thing because it might have stretched credibility a bit too far if she'd, you know, continued doing stuff on her own, especially if it led to certain things that, you know, would come out. But anyway, she's back on the case in this episode. But yeah, I think one of the really big emotional scenes and one of the most beautiful scenes I've seen in this show, maybe the most beautiful in some ways, is the scene quite early on with Mare and Helen, her mother, because there's this really tough, unflinching scene where Mare goes to see Colin's mother and says, "I'm so sorry," passes on her condolences and apologizes. And she's just really brutal with Mare. She just slams the door in her face. She slaps her a couple of times, and she just blames her for Colin no longer being around. She says basically, if he didn't follow you into that house, he would still be alive now. And Mare just has to take it on the chin. It's a really hard moment for her to take, and I think there's this extra sort of layer to it because of the fact that she was close to Colin and there was a relationship developing, and that she's lost him, obviously, which is tough for her. Obviously, not on the same level as his mother, but at the same time, I think that exchange with the mother is doubly hard, partly because of maybe there being some truth to it, and obviously what the mother's been going through, but also because of the fact that Mare's lost him. But she has to obviously take that on the chin because it's understandable the way the mother feels. But the scene I'm talking about is when she comes home and she just unleashes her emotions and just starts crying uncontrollably with Helen. And it's this beautiful moment because it's like this rare scene of like mother and daughter coming together, because for a lot of this series they've obviously been at each other's throat, and Helen just, she's there for Mare, like like mothers are, like great mothers are. And it's generally one of the most touching scenes I've ever seen in this show. Like during this show, it's just fantastic, and it's great to see. It's almost a payoff type thing, considering what a rocky relationship they've had. Um, as I said, some of the other big stuff with Mare is to do with her and the trauma over the teenage son. Obviously, when he committed suicide. And there's a scene with the therapist where the therapist suggests that I think you're still not dealing with it. You haven't grieved properly, and you need to. And she kind of sort of encourages Mare to talk about it, about that day. And we do get a reveal in this, and that is that it was actually Yvonne who discovered, I forget actually his name now, but the son who had hung himself in the up in the attic. That it was actually like, because Mare knew that she was nearby, so actually sent her, and Yvonne was the first person to find her, which understandably has traumatized Yvonne even more so than the fact that it happened. But Mary lives it, and it's a powerful scene. Again, great acting from Winslet. I think my one small complaint with that scene is that we do get a flashback to it actually happening, and I think that was a small complaint I had with a previous episode, where I don't think you actually needed the flashback. I think the emotion of the scene, the drama, the acting is enough. I think that sells it enough. I think the flashback isn't needed, but it's a credit to the writing and the drama and the acting that it works. It still works so well. You're just with it, and such a powerful thing. And we also see the way it impacts on Yvonne in this episode, because you have this storyline where Yvonne is considering her future, and she's considering not going to college because she's in this new relationship which she's excited about, and that's part of her thinking, that does she want to leave this behind. And again, her girlfriend, being the older, more mature one, is advising her, well, no, this is quite new. We don't know each other that well. I like you, but I can't really ask you to put your whole future on hold for me. And I think for a while, I sort of thought, well, is this just going to be kind of forced, unneeded drama? And again, it's credit to the writing on this show that it proves not to be the case, because what actually happens is that Erin sorry, not Erin, Yvonne, similar sounding names, sort of loses her mind basically one night because she wants to talk to her girlfriend about this stuff, and the girlfriend has a gig so she can't get hold of her, and she's like just ringing her frantically, and then she gets high, she takes some drugs, and she also gets drunk, and it's just this whole messy thing where her mindset is spiraling out of control, and she just keeps ringing her and just loses her mind essentially. Um, but what it leads to is that Mare comes home and finds her, and they have like a scene, and Yvonne is just like gets mad at her, why did I have to be the one to find her, this sort of thing, and it's almost this moment of this heart to heart, and this sort of very true, honest reaction, and they're together because of it. Mare's there for her and comforts Yvonne, and it's powerful stuff. So I think that was really clever writing. The fact that it wasn't just like this relationship drama with her and with Yvonne and her girlfriend. I think it part of her feelings and conflict was to do with her not maybe properly coming to terms or grieving with the suicide of her brother, and similar to Mare's stuff. So sort of crucial personal moments for both characters in this episode, and it's really well done. It's really sort of good writing. Another bit of good writing, actually, I think, is how they've handled the sort of what was a potential love triangle really between Mare, Colin, who's obviously no longer in the picture, and also Richard, Guy Pearce's character, who he returns in this episode for a brief scene. And it's just a small scene, but again, it's sort of nicely done. And he's obviously heard about the whole thing, and he's there to support Mare. Again, he seems like a really decent, solid sort of guy who's a positive like part of Mare's life, and he's just very sorry, and it is like understanding when Mare says that night, that I did broke up our like date and didn't meet you, it's because I was on a date with Colin, and he's like really understanding. He's like, hey, well, we didn't have an official thing going, that sort of thing, but he sort of handles it very well. He's like, when you're ready, if you want to go out on a date with me, I would be up for that. And Mare's like, there's which leads to the line of the episode, because she says, well, how do I know you'll still be available when it comes to that? And Richard has this response. It's like, well, I'm 52. I live in Easttown, so the odds are pretty much on your side. And I think that might be my line of the episode. But yeah, it's nice to see Guy Pearce and Richard again. So they have it. I wonder if they might just leave that side open, if it might just be something that they could come back to in the future. Like Mare could have a relationship with him when she's ready, but we won't actually like see them officially sort of get back together. But we'll see. Nicely done, and I think they have handled that side pretty well, where you didn't really have this sort of clunky love triangle with her, Richard, and with Colin. And I think one reason is actually Richard being so decent in this scene. I mean, obviously now that Colin's no longer around, it would maybe be a bit petty for him to get like jealous and stuff or mad, but I do like that he's like really decent and supportive in this scene. They could have played him maybe as the stereotypical douchebag. I think sometimes because of the nature of this sort of show, you're almost expecting that to happen at some point, and it might turn out that Richard does have closets sorry, I should say skeletons in the old closet, or that he would turn out to be a bit of a dick. But hey, so far so good on that front. So let's talk about the actual case, because there's two potential suspects in this episode that are like flagged up, and then it's sort of proved not to be them. Is Freddie. Mare actually finds dead in this episode of an overdose, because his sister missing for days. His sister asks Mare to go to try and find him, and she finds him dead. But she also finds these t-shirts in his room, and there's t-shirts that t-shirt of like the reunion, and links him to Irene potentially of that night, Kenny in prison. Explains this. He says that morbid maybe, but then he sort of said Freddie could have some of Aaron's stuff, just for kind of morbid reasons. He just wanted it to go to someone. Like asks her friend Laura, or anyone else there at that reunion on that weekend, and she's obviously fishing and trying to see if maybe Freddie was there, like a further link. And she doesn't mention Freddie when she goes through the names. Dylan, because of what we saw happen last week, and we find out that, well, Jess tells the police that about the whole diary things and the journal entries, and friend comes clean about him not being with her that night, about her waking up in the middle of the night and him not being around. So he's later questioned, and he comes up with quite a flimsy story about just saying he couldn't get to sleep, so he decided to go for a drive and have a smoke or whatever, and that sort of. But there's clearly enough evidence for them to kind of still pursue him and keep tabs on him. So he's very much sort of in the spotlight. And there's this scene where him and his mates go after Erin. Sorry, I keep doing this because it's the best friend. They go after Jess, and he threatens her basically, like, hey, did you tell that detective about us taking the journal? And he holds her at gunpoint, and he actually says the line, don't you say a word. If you do, I'll shoot you in the face, like Erin. And it's one of those lines, it sort of makes it sound like maybe he did kill Erin, because it's almost like this sort of phrase where I'll shoot you like I shot Erin, just because of the description. But I think in hindsight that could have been quite a clever line to sort of like make us think it's Dylan, because what happens is it's later revealed that it's Billy, as in John and I think it's Lorne or Lauren, the best friend of Mare. It's their son, and this all comes out because John gets kicked out because Laura finds out that he's been having an affair with this girl who he's had an affair with previously, and that's the secret with which he was telling Ryan not to tell her about in the last episode, and part of the reason Ryan was so upset in the last episode. So she's kicked him out of the house, and John, sort of a bit of like comedy here, because John has he's now staying with his father, who also has his other son Billy staying there. So that's sort of quite sort of funny, both sons going to stay there. But there's quite clearly Billy's hiding something, because he really goes into a rage at his father at one point. It turns out that then it's Billy linked to Irene and killed her, because Millie stayed in the cabin with Irene that sort of weekend of the reunion, and And this is a nice reveal. So he's actually the father's the baby's real father, DJ's. So he slept with Aaron that night, wanted to come clean about the whole thing and tell Dylan and other people, and that's sort of why he shot her, sort of out of desperation to keep it under tabs. Is that Billy comes clean to John, and John obviously consoles his son, and then you get a conversation where John tells Lauren, and he's then telling her, "You can't tell Mare. We have to protect our son, so don't say anything to Mare." Billy says, "I want to confess," basically, and John's like, "Okay, but let's go on one last father-son camping trip before you do that." And with this being TV drama, you can kind of see where this is heading, and that it's not going to be as simple as him just letting that be that. That he purchased a gun before, and Billy, at one point we see him looking like a toolbox, and there's a gun there, and they've now gone on this trip, so I'm assuming from that then the father maybe intends to do something to the son. So Mare goes to Lorne and speak to her, and at first she is quite cryptic. She's saying stuff and starts like putting pressure on her. Tells the truth and just tells her about what happened exactly and where they are. Actually, one sort of beat here where she's driving up to the cabin, and she calls the chief of police, and she's like, yeah, explains the whole thing and says, "I'm going down," and he's like, wait till backup, basically, and they're like, yeah, will do, 10-4, whatever. And of course, this being Mare, she's never gonna wait till backup. She just drives off. It's great. It's classic Mare. But anyway, yeah, it obviously builds to this grand sort of climax where they've gone on the camping trip. Mare's in pursuit, but can she get there in time? But there's even more intrigue. Because there's sort of one big reveal to come, and that is at the end of the episode when all this is happening. Jess comes back to the police station and tells them, about burning the pages, but she also gives the chief this one page that she ripped out. That obviously is going to be crucial, and the chief looks at it and he immediately says, get me Mare." So there is, I mean, we've pretty much confirmed that Billy is the killer, but there's obviously going to be one last piece of the puzzle, one last like big reveal. That's something to do with that journal page. So all exciting stuff. It's all building to a really great last dramatic episode next week. So I'm very excited. This has been one of my the surprises of the year, like a pleasant surprise. Yeah, what do you think could go down? What do you think the reveal with that of what's on that page could be? And reveal was handled, yeah, well, generally well, of the stuff with Billy. I remember in a previous episode there'd been a couple of scenes with him when he'd been acting a bit like tense and that he had something. So it's around about this time next week with my review of the final episode. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Also get me up on Twitter at Keith Beard. You can support the channel if you want to donate to my PayPal account. I'll put the link in the description. But I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.